Joining me now to discuss, the founder of the Metamorphosis Center for Psychological and Physical Change, which treats children, adolescents, adults, and families, Dr. Renee Exelbert. Doctor, thank you so much for being with me this evening. What do you have to say about this bill that Ron DeSantis is pushing to basically make it so that if somebody's under 14, they can't access social media? 14 to 15, they need parental consent. Is that a bit too far, or do you think that would actually go a long way to benefiting children and young adolescents?
You know, David, we have legal age limits here in this country to prevent children and adolescents from buying harmful substances like alcohol and cigarettes, right? And when we think about psychologically, we're not protecting children at all. There's a real inequity in terms of psychological and physical health. We know unequivocally that there's been a 70% increase in depression in children and adolescents since the advent of social media. We know that 42% of high school students are experiencing depression, 57% of adolescent girls report persistent sadness, and a quarter of adolescent girls have already come up with a suicide plan. We know unequivocally that there's a high correlation with social media, with not only depression, anxiety, eating disorders, but also fentanyl use, sex trafficking, sextortion.
So it seems to me, and those are some pretty staggering statistics. I think if I heard you right, 25% of adolescent girls have already thought or planned out their own suicide?
Absolutely. And double the amount of girls are feeling depression than boys. A quarter of all kids are even being cyberbullied, with that rate doubled for girls. As that image from Julia Roberts was suggesting, it's really overwhelming because children, they're trying to develop their sense of self, and they don't have the biological ability. Their prefrontal cortex in their brain isn't developed until they're in their 20s. So they can't think through things. They don't have the skill set to understand that even what they're putting out there is permanent.
Well, and add to that just how absolutely rude and harmful kids can be. I mean, we've seen the videos, from actual violence that some kids, teenagers will, conduct on other individuals, on other kids. And then, the cyberbullying, the belittling, the demeaning comments that people can make, that kids can make. And then you have, somebody as well established, as famous, as secure as Julia Roberts, saying that she was taken back by all those. If it's going to have that kind of a damage, potentially, just even on the thought process of Julia Roberts, imagine what it's happening to these young kids. So you don't think that it's too much government overreach by any means whatsoever for Governor DeSantis to suggest and to push forward this bill?
We've had so many bills that have been put forth, in front of Congress. We had the CEOs from Meta and other social media companies grilled a few weeks ago. Nothing's really been happening. I think what would be ideal would be to get some more parental controls. But, even parents can't access their children 24/7. Preteens are on their phones 4 to 6 hours a day. 4 to 6 hours, and adolescents
Wow.
are on their phones 8 hours. You could have a job in that time, so to leave the
Yeah.
onus all up to parents is really hard, and the other thing is that parents are feeling tremendous pressure because really when their kids are like 10 years old, they're hearing from their children that everybody has social media. And so parents are feeling this pressure that they have to give in and give their children this, far-reaching effects where they can, be targeted by anybody. And so I do feel like we really have to have more controls in place. Absolutely. We've seen an
Well,
entire
I think
generation.
I think a great way to put it, as you said, is we already have legal limits. We have laws in place. You got to be a certain age before you can smoke. You got to be a certain age before you can, vote. But you got to be a certain age before you can drink. And you got to be a certain age before you can drive. And really, what social media, the access that it gives kids and the access it gives other kids to belittle and bully and everything else, it is something that I think that we should protect kids from. So what do you, if you could see into the future, what you know, and the amount of people, individuals, families, and kids that you've worked with, what do you think kind of statistics might change in Florida after this bill goes into effect?
Well, we've actually seen a 50% reduction when children and teens reduce their time. We've actually seen a 50% reduction in depression. So what I encourage, children and
Wow.
adolescents that I see to do is that, before they go on social media sites, I encourage them to do a self-rating scale, 0 to 10. 0, I don't feel any sadness. 10, I'm really, really sad. And I encourage them every time before they go on to do a self-rating scale and see how they feel afterwards. And, it's not surprising when they come off. Almost everyone talks about, feeling like they're missing out, feeling like they're comparing themselves to highlight reels, to airbrushed images, that their life isn't good enough. And it's not only children, adults feel this as well. So when we think about the developing brain of a child who just doesn't have the self-esteem, to deal with that constant rejection and that constant comparison, we really need to be doing something more effective here.
Well, I like that test you said. What's the name of that? You said it's a test. Is the one to 10?
It's
One.
my test.
Explain that
It's
again.
the Renee Exelbert self-rating scale. It's just a scale that I encourage kids to do on their own. 0, they're not feeling sad at all the way up to 10, they're feeling super sad. And every time they go on to just give themselves a score and average it at the end of the week and see how it's really impacting them, because most people don't realize, what it's doing to them on a daily basis.
That is powerful. That right there is something that all parents that have kids that are adolescents or preteens that already are on social media, that's something I think every parent should be doing. Dr. Renee Exelbert, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
David,
Really appreciate what you had to share.
thank you.